Lake of Tears?
That's right. The latest episode of From Season 4 really cemented just how horrifyingly cruel the monsters of the town can be, setting up a situation where two kids could walk into a barn only to find their father mutilated and hanging upside down from a rafter is purely diabolical. I still have difficulty accepting the fact that Jim is truly dead because he was just a good man trying his best to keep his family safe during these trying times. None of the Matthews are handling it well, and it's definitely heartbreaking to witness Julie and Ethan struggle with the shocking news of their father's absence. Not just that, Jim's death sent shockwaves through the entire town, and to be honest, it really feels like a personal loss at this point. From never breaks character even for a second of comic relief. The show never sets down its intensity, and that's exactly why Jim's death feels like the start of the domino effect in a prolonged nightmare. But then, at the end of episode 2 of season 4, we see the spirit of Jim mentioning the Lake of Tears to Ethan and urging him to look for it. Why is this lake important? This almost felt like Ethan receiving one last guiding moment from his dad. So why did Jim even ask him to look for this Lake of Tears? Without wasting another moment, let's discuss some theories we have about what it could really mean. Jim's death, the barn horror, and the return of the Lake of Tears. So, Frey began with Boyd and Tabitha spotting a blood-stained bag hanging from the motel sign, which led them to believe that it was the remains of Jim inside. That's what made them send Ethan and Julie away to the barn so they could be spared from the horror of seeing their father in such a horrifying condition. But, as it turns out, the bag was only filled with goat and ram parts, which was also creepy, but nothing compared to what was going to happen next. When Ethan and Julie open the door to the barn in order to feed the animals, they scream in horror as they witness Jim's mutilated body strung upside down from a rafter, with a warning written on the wall claiming that knowledge comes at a cost, thus echoing the same words told by the man in yellow moments before he killed Jim. While we see the Matthews family reeling from Jim's death for the entire episode, Julie embraces her story-walking abilities by traveling back in time. However, the most noteworthy twist in the episode was Ethan meeting Jim near their RV. Of course, his father had died, so it appeared to be Jim's spirit, though From obviously wants us to question whether it was truly him. That was definitely a very cathartic and sweet moment for Ethan as they shared a hug, and Jim asked his son to take care of his mother and sister. While the legitimacy of this encounter is debatable, it definitely felt very real to Ethan. We then see Jim remind Ethan of the dream he had on their very first night in this hellhole, when he told his father about a place called the Lake of Tears. Now, people who have seen the debut season might remember that seemingly throwaway reference that Ethan made right after he woke up from his seizure, after the Matthews family got into an accident and crashed their RV. Back then, Ethan had described a Lake of Tears that he had seen in a room full of drawings, which was later connected to Victor's room at Colony House. Victor used crayons to make drawings in order to document all his traumatizing experiences and memories while growing up alone in the town. Of course, we heard no more mention of the Lake of Tears until now, but given that Ethan had seen the place in Victor's drawings, it automatically seems to be an important location. There's also the fact that every drawing Victor ever made is there to document the past, which means that he might actually know where the lake really is, just like how he knew that the bottle tree would lead Tabitha to the lighthouse. But getting the location of the lake out of him will probably not be easy, because after Jim's death, Victor seems to be traumatized to a point that he's now lashing out at his father in order to push him away, as this place always takes away everything good. Anyway, at the end of the episode, Jim insists that Ethan look for the Lake of Tears, as it's very important. In response, when Ethan asks why they should not find it together, Tabitha suddenly arrives, causing Jim's spirit to disappear. Was it really Jim's spirit or another trick from the town? We know that Ethan has foretold many important events in the show, and most of his visions are horrific in an inexplicable way. The Lake of Tears just seems to be one of those visions. There's also the fact that everyone in town who had seizures started seeing dreams or having visions that would go on to come true, be it Sarah, Ethan, or Elgin. Of course, we don't find out a lot about this place, but it seems like the mysterious location is going to take up the main focus in both Julie and Ethan's quest. Having said that, people also seem to be confused if that was the spirit of the real Jim that Ethan met, or just another way the town used grief to make a pawn out of a grieving child. Well, for starters, if you've watched the entire show with utmost focus, you probably know that the dead people of the town have a history of showing up to characters in their moments of need. The first person to witness this was Boyd, who has been visited by Father Khatri multiple times, and most recently, we even see his spirit trying to talk the sheriff out of torturing Elgin for answers. Not just that, the town's former bartender, Tom, also appeared to Jade more than once in order to guide him back on the right track. While we never receive a clear explanation about these encounters, they don't exactly seem to be figments of imagination born out of stress, confusion, or loneliness. However, there is also the fact that Jim showed up exactly outside the RV, sitting on a log, and was even surprised to see Ethan there. So this haunting, per se, almost feels different. Not just that, throughout their entire conversation, we notice Jim continuously looking over Ethan's shoulder, almost like he was afraid of getting caught or that he didn't have much time left. With no clear answers, it's surely still possible that Jim's appearance after his death was just another illusion created by the township to trick Ethan. But looking at Frum's past, all similar moments have often hinted at something more genuine and hopeful. Plus, Jim's reaction matters too, as he seemed to be genuinely surprised to see Ethan, and there was also a slightly uneasy, almost secretive edge to how he behaved. That kind of detail made it feel like he was actually tied to the RV in some way, which wouldn't really add up if this were just another trick. More than anything though, the scene carried a kind of warmth that stands out. The township's darker forces usually tend to feel cold and manipulative, even when they're pretending. But the moment Ethan shares with his dad doesn't quite fit that pattern, which makes it feel like there could be something real behind it. Moreover, at this stage, Frum has made it clear that the township isn't just about the creatures that come out at night. There are other forces at play too. On one side, you've got the man in yellow, who increasingly feels like the true mastermind behind everything, along with the eerie kimono woman, who manipulated Elgin into locking Fatima in the cellar. But on the other side, there are also mysterious forces that seem to be trying to help, just not in ways that are easy to understand. The boy in white, for example, has always felt like a quiet counterbalance to the man in yellow. He rarely explains himself, usually just pointing or speaking in riddles, but his actions have often nudged people toward important discoveries, even if his full motive is still unclear. Then there are the Ankui children, whose tragic past revealed how they were sacrificed to give the monsters their immortality. These ghoulish kids also guided Jade and Tabitha in the right direction in order to make that important discovery. What really sets these forces apart is, of course, the tone surrounding them. Even when Elgin believed he was doing the right thing by trusting the kimono woman, that entire storyline felt unsettling, bringing out fear and desperation in everyone involved. In contrast to that, the moments tied to the town's more benevolent forces tend to feel different and less threatening, even if they are still mysterious. So what I'm trying to say here is that Jim's spirit may have just set Ethan on the right path, and even if it's going to be a dangerous one, only time will tell why the Lake of Tears is so important in Frumville. Theory 1. The Lake of Tears could be a real location in Frumville. Now we're coming to my theories about what the Lake of Tears could be. But before that, I want to mention that this place is particularly known as the Lake of Tears because it is also a location in the Flight of the Chromonocle, which is the name of the book that Ethan brought along with him to the town. It is possible that Ethan couldn't identify the location he saw in Victor's drawing, and therefore named it after one of the places he had read about in the book. Anyway, we'll start with the easiest theory, which would be assuming that the Lake of Tears is a location that we are all aware of. If you remember, when Elgin first came to town, he asked Fatima if there was a lake somewhere in town as he saw it in his dream, and given the current turn of events, it seems like he had also seen the Lake of Tears in his dream. Fatima then took him to the Brundles in return, so maybe that could lead to the Lake of Tears, or maybe it's the large lake that Jim and Kenny found deep within the forest, near the settlement. It could be possible that the escape route is hidden somewhere within this lake and is heavily guarded, just like the other puzzling locations in the township. I also think that maybe the Lake of Tears is made out of the literal tears of the Ankui children, who are sacrificed to grant the creatures their immortality, thus making the lake the purest place in the entire Fromville. Maybe to cross it, everyone would have to fight their own battles before finally making it to the real world. However, this theory is also a bit vague too, right? So let's go on to Theory 2. The spider drawing may be protecting the lake. I have another solid theory that might just work. Remember how in one of Victor's drawings, dreamt by Ethan in Season 1, we see a large spider dangling over a water body? Maybe that water body is the Lake of Tears being protected by the spider. If you remember, back in Season 2, when Boyd went out to explore the forest along with Sarah, their tent got dragged through the woods at night, leading them to wake up in a section of the forest draped in massive spider webs. There, he gets attacked and bitten by a swarm of spiders before eventually reaching the bottle tree. I guess even if they didn't get to see the lake, Boyd and Sarah had entered the giant spider's territory that Ethan had mentioned in his dream during Season 1. That scene now feels like the spiders were trying to stop Boyd from exploring too much because maybe they were preventing him from reaching the Lake of Tears. There was also another drawing made by Victor where we see a man seemingly trying to cross a lake, only to be stopped by a yellow-clothed man. So maybe, in the grander scheme of things, the Lake of Tears could be one of the only routes connected to escape, but in order to get to the other side, they would inevitably have to fight the man in yellow. Not just that, I also believe that when the boy in white had pushed Tabitha through the lighthouse, she actually fell into the lake, thus allowing her to escape Fromville. The boy also mentioned it was the only way out, and later, when Tabitha woke up in the hospital in Maine, the doctor informed her that some hikers found her unconscious near a lake. Jade had also mentioned his theory of a wormhole near the lighthouse that allowed Tabitha to pass through, so maybe that is true, as the other end of the Lake of Tears could essentially be the real world. The Lake of Tears might be the end piece of the puzzle. Of course, only time will tell just how important the Lake of Tears is for the residents in Fromville, but from what every clue tells us, this location might just be the end piece of this puzzle. Of course, with the man in yellow living so close to the townspeople and observing their every move, finding this lake would be anything but easy. So I'm truly excited to see how Ethan and Victor figure out the route to the Lake of Tears. But that was just my 2 cents. What are your theories about this place? Let us know in the comment box below.